Yeah, I said it. Westside doesn't work for raw powerlifting.
You can't say that. Quads are a myth. Westside is the best side.
What's up, guys? It's Dr. Seth, and we are back. Today, we're going to talk about Westside, why it looks like it doesn't work for raw powerlifting, and how some simple tweaks, not to the system, but of our understanding of the system, can make it very effective for building a raw powerlifting total. I have been back doing more real Westside-y stuff since my pec surgery. And a lot of you might be looking at me like I am crazy because I have hit some pretty decent totals doing the exact opposite of what most people think of as Westside. I have made linear work very, very, very well. I've used a high-frequency DUP model to hit my biggest Wilks of all time. And something that I want to drive into you guys is that the program, the system, it really doesn't matter. What matters is the execution within that program and the execution within that system. What matters is how people are applying them. And the reason that Westside gets such a bad rap for raw powerlifting is that a lot of people just don't understand how to apply it to a raw meet prep. And that's really no one's fault because the system was created by a guy that didn't give a rat's ass about raw powerlifting. So none of what he wrote about was directly for raw. In the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s, they really didn't put on the gear until meet day. And yeah, the gear was not as extreme, but the technique they were using, the sit back, the wide, the open up, the ultra tucky bench, that was all directed towards putting on the gear and being able to do well. The exercise selection, the technique, the intent, it was all biased towards putting on a squat suit, putting on a bench shirt, putting on a deadlift suit, and getting the biggest total possible with that equipment on. Louis was an absolute freaking genius to come up with what he came up with. There is no better system for multiply equipped lifting, hands down, no argument, fact. So if it's so good for multiply, why do so many people make zero progress when they try to run Westside for raw powerlifting? It comes down to the exercise selection, the technique, the intent, the loading. All of that was directed towards putting pounds on an equipped powerlifting platform. If we try to go equipped direction but apply it to raw, we're gonna end up swerving all over the place and not getting anywhere. And I was there. I did it. I was a multiply lifter. I was a conjugate Westside Louis disciple. I swore by the system, and it worked really, really, really well when I was competing equipped. I got really generally strong. So strong that my first raw meet after half a decade multiply, I pulled a 2K total out of my ass, still training like a multiply lifter, squatting ultra wide, sitting way back, pretending my quads didn't exist. And after that, I wanted to think that every raw coach and every raw lifter was an idiot because this worked so well for me. And I would have kept thinking like that had I not been banged up, had I not had a lot of injuries, and had I not known that if I'm this messed up, what I'm doing right now clearly isn't working perfectly. And at the same time, I had a lot of really good coaching influences, namely Daniel Teniero, Trevor Jaffe, Dan Bell. They were all like, dude, use your freaking quads, use your freaking pecs. Your quads and your pecs will help you. They are going to make you stronger. And in listening to them, in training my quads, in training my pecs, in narrowing my squat up, in benching a little bit more flared, in not just leaning back like an asshole in my deadlifts, my total went up like that. And flash forward to now, I'm back doing Westside stuff, I'm back doing real conjugate, so what gives? Number one, it's allowing me the freedom to train hard and still have fun while recovering from this pec surgery. And number two, knowing what I know now and knowing how well it works for multiply, I want to show you guys how to make it work for raw powerlifting. And to make conjugate work for raw powerlifting, we've got to talk about that big, nasty elephant in the room, and that is specificity. And when I'm talking about specificity, I'm not talking about just making the thing look identical to the competition lift, because if we are doing a system which revolves around using different variations to build up towards the main lift, we're not really going to be doing a ton of stuff that looks identical to the main lift. And what we need to do is make those variations specific to the needs of the lifter in their chosen discipline. For a raw lifter, that is going to look a lot different than a multiply lifter, because in multiply, we have a squat suit that we're pushing into, we have a bencher that we're pulling into, we have a deadlift suit that's ripping our nutsack off. We have to bias our technique and our strength to be able to push into that gear. In raw, we don't have gear to push back into, we don't have gear to pull into, we have to support the weight entirely ourselves, and because of that, the ideal positions, the ideal technique, and the ideal patterns are going to change. And in general, we can talk about multiply as being posterior chain dominant. Now, I don't want to go as far to say that raw is anterior dominant. I don't really want to talk about dominant this, dominant that, dominant whatever when it comes to raw powerlifting, because we have a front side of our body, we have a back side of our body. We want the front side to be strong so that our back side can work better. We want our back side to be strong so that our front side can work better. A strong front side leads to a strong back side, and when they're both strong, we get a strong total. But with the increased demand on the anterior chain that comes with raw powerlifting, we should bias our training more towards the anterior chain. For a raw lifter, we should be thinking front squat, hack squat, leg extension, dumbbell press, dumbbell fly, all of the things that are going to build up the front side of our body. And if you're training conjugate and your interpretation totally ignores the anterior chain, no wonder it isn't working, because you need a strong anterior chain to have a big raw total. There's no way around it. And the next thing that raw lifters screw up with Westside is technique within their exercise selection. If you look at the book of methods, it's always wide box squat this, wide good morning that, ultra wide sumo stiff leg for an accessory. And that isn't because a wide stance is anything magical. That is because to get pounds out of gear, it is better to be wide than it is narrow. And if you're a raw lifter, unless your name is Shane Haller, you're probably not stronger out wide than you are relatively narrow. And if you are Shane Haller, ignore this section of the video, because we are all jealous of your taint strength to support that wide stance. If we are going to compete with a narrow to moderate stance, we need to be training with that narrow to moderate stance so that we are strong in the stance we are going to compete in. If all you do is box squat, sat back, ultra wide, and you go to your comp squat and you're narrower, your knees forward, of course it isn't going to translate, of course it isn't going to carry over, because you have no practice in the pattern that you are trying to display. And this is not saying that wide box squats don't work. This is not saying that wide box squats cannot be used to build up adductors or build up hips. This is saying that if we want to squat moderate to narrow, we need to be doing at least some moderate to narrow squats, or enough moderate to narrow squats to support our competition stance. And the exact same thing goes for bench. If we are a pecky bencher like most raw lifters are, and all we're doing in training is close grip 2 boards, close grip 3 boards, close grip 4 boards, jam presses, rolling dumbbell extensions, and then we go to bench in a meet, of course the bottom end is going to feel like shit. I love all of those for tricep builders, but that doesn't mean that I'm ignoring my chest in training, because I want my pecs to be strong, because I need a strong bottom end. And the last thing that raw lifters screw up when it comes to applying conjugate is the amount of work they are doing and where they are putting their effort. And this isn't just a raw lifter thing, this is a almost everyone doing conjugate thing, because it's exciting to put effort into the max effort work. It's exciting to do big singles. It's less exciting to get back under the bar every 30 seconds for speed work. It's less exciting to blast the shit out of your quads and pecs and lats and hamstrings and glutes and all that on isolation exercises for your accessories. Too many people do their max effort work, take 4 hours working up to the top set, and then just go home. Too many people forget to try on dynamic effort work. Too many people forget to do accessories altogether. When we are talking about conjugate, when we're talking about Westside, we need to think of a pyramid. The top of your pyramid, that is going to be your competition movements on competition day. The next part below, that's your max effort movements. The next part below, that's your secondary movements. The next part below is your accessory movements. The next part below is your conditioning. If you don't do enough conditioning work to support your accessories, if you don't do enough accessories to support your secondaries, if you don't do enough secondaries to support your max effort work, if you don't do enough max effort work to support your competition movements, of course you are going to get your ass kicked on meet day. If you are going to train conjugate, we can't just be thinking about the fun little max effort stuff at the top. We need to build the base to support the peak. If you are a raw lifter trying to make conjugate work, don't make those mistakes. Train specific to your needs. Select movements that will actually build towards what you need to do on your competition lift. Train with technique specific to the movements you are actually going to be doing on the platform. Don't go your entire training cycle squatting out wide, then bring your stance in on meet day and expect it to go well. And lastly, do enough work to support the system as a whole. We need to acknowledge that Louis was a genius. He pushed this sport further forward than anyone else has, so don't go doing him a disservice by making his system look like shit. Thank you for watching. If you liked this, do me a favor and go watch another.